All right, claiming Jerusalem. So hopefully you can get some main points here. Probably, the real main points are going to be the three faiths. So we're going to look at probably Islam first, Islam, then Judaism, and then Christianity. So you think about those on the left-hand side of the line, details over there on the right-hand side. We're looking at what claims, what rights do the followers of these three faiths have towards Jerusalem, meaning that Jerusalem should be underneath their control, or they would at least have pilgrimage rights to Jerusalem because of maybe the holy sites that are found that are in Jerusalem that are associated with their faith. So again, I do encourage you to have a sheet of notebook paper out. Works really well for our comprehension. Make sure that you're following along, please. Okay. Little cartoon to start off with. A few years ago, there was a Secretary of State. His name was John Kerry, underneath the Obama administration. And the artist of this political cartoon was trying to demonstrate or exemplify or communicate what this conflict is like between the Israelis and Palestinians. Here in a couple of weeks, we're going to dig deeper into that conflict, Palestinians and Israelis. But this just gives you a little bit of a heads up, a little bit of hint at that. Is there an easy resolution or solution to the conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis? There's not, okay? And it's a very complex type of situation. And almost this artist communicates the idea that, are we ever going to be able to solve this problem between the Israelis and Palestinians, the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians? Probably not, all right? A lot of historians, a lot of people that are familiar with the situation, the way things are going, it's becoming more and more less likely from a lot of people's perspectives. Okay, remember in that scenario with the Israelis and Palestinians, the Palestinians would like to have their own national identity, have the nation to themselves. Whenever Israel was created back in 1948, 1949, there was different types of segments separated. Some of the segments were to the Palestinians, the rest of it was to the Israelis. I want to go back and identify the three Palestinian territories. Anybody remember what this one's called? It's called the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip. It's a small strip of land. Okay, it used to be much bigger, but because of losing land in war, number of wars between the Palestinians and Israelis, it's gotten much, much smaller. Even though it's really small, there's a lot of Palestinians that live inside that small territory. It's one of the most densely populated places in the world. Right? It's really, really small. It's like walled off. Like the Israelis have walled it off from the rest of Israel, separated that way. It's one of the most poverty-stricken places in the world as well. If it wasn't for like aid from like the United Nations reaching out to those individuals, the Palestinians, there would be a lot of death associated with living there. Okay? This is called the West Bank. That's where Jerusalem is found within. And Jerusalem is sectioned off because it's such an important city inside of the West Bank. And this is the Golan Heights up here. Okay? All right. So Jerusalem, again, it's partitioned itself because it's such an important city in Israel. Important to not only the Palestinians, the Israelis, but people all over the world because of their association with Islam or Christianity or Judaism. So they say it's quartered, right? We're going to focus on 3 of the 4 quarters. We're not going to look at so much at the Armenian quarter, but we're going to look at the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, and then the Christian quarter. And I want you to take up note of right now what's inside the red. It's called the Temple Mount. Okay? The Temple Mount, actually, it's got its origins in the Jewish faith, Jewish history. It goes back to a Jewish king thousands of years ago. This would be the Israelites back then, not the Israelis, is what we reference today. But the Israelites. There was this king, and his name began with an S, and he created this huge temple structure in what is the old city of Jerusalem. Does anybody know that king's name? His name is Solomon, King Solomon. Okay, so a huge temple structure. And the purpose of this temple structure for the nation of Israel at that time was their medium by which they could communicate with their Jewish God. Okay, and they would do all these sacrifices here for cleansing type of purposes. They had this location on the Temple Mount, which was called like the Holy of Holies, which would be the main point where they could have intercession, they could have communication with their God. there. Okay, so it's extremely important. Now, during the Roman Empire, Jerusalem became under control of the Romans, right? And because the people in Jerusalem weren't doing exactly what the Romans wanted them to do, the Roman officials eventually got upset, and they came into Jerusalem. They destroyed everything, including the temple, right? So the main place of worship, the main means by which they could reach out to their God, is now gone. So do the Jews really have much motivation for staying in Jerusalem at that point in time after the Romans destroyed the temple? No, they don't have the motivation like they used to, okay? So this leads to a process called diaspora. I do want you to write that term down, diaspora. It's D-I-A-S-P-O-R-A. D-I-A-S-P-O-R-A. Diaspora. And it means dispersion of population. I'm going to write that out to the side. Dispersion, spreading out of a population. So, so the Jews that were living in Jerusalem or the surrounding area around Jerusalem at that point in time, again, this is a couple thousand years ago. It's about the year of 70. In the year 70, right, is when this took place. You may write 70. It's like the letter A, D, 70, right? It's not BC, but it's AD. It's the time when the Romans destroyed the temple. And so the Jews experience this diaspora. They leave Israel, right? They go to other places in the Middle East, North Africa. They go to Europe primarily, right? And they establish new lives there. Okay, so when they leave, who do you think moves into that area? Yeah, the Muslims, right? The Muslims, the Palestinians, they move in and they take control. Okay, so ever since in that period of about 2,000 years since the Jews left, then it's gone back and forth. There was a time during the Crusades when the Christians actually took control of Jerusalem, but then the Crusades ended and it went back. Muslim control, Christian control. It's been underneath the control of Jews as well. Okay, so a little bit of history there. All right, let's focus on Islam. What rightful claims do they have to Jerusalem? What holy sites make it really important for followers of Islam? So you'll notice, if you go back to the map, that Temple Mount, it's actually in the Muslim quarter. So Jews and really, I'm pretty sure it's specific to Jews. It could be maybe even Christians as well, but they're not allowed to go up on the Temple Mount, right? Quite a few years ago, Jews were allowed to go up on top of the Temple Mount, but because of the conflict between the Palestinians and Israelis, they just decided it would be best if the Jews didn't go on top of the Temple Mount where the holy sites for Muslims are found today. So Jews are not allowed to go there, at least I don't believe at this point in time, unless there's some exceptional circumstances. Okay? So a couple holy sites that are on top of the Temple Mount that are important for followers of Islam. First one is the Dome of the Rock. If you see postcards from Jerusalem, a lot of times you see this structure in the background. It's got a golden dome, kind of sticks out from the rest of the buildings there. Okay, it's actually, the dome itself has changed hands. During the Crusades, the Christians took control of it and made it a cathedral, right? But then it went back underneath Muslim control and made it into a kind of a mosque as well. It's really not so much the structure but what's inside this structure that's really important. It's called the Dome of the Rock because it's got this rock underneath it. Okay, and this rock really has some spiritual significance for not just Muslims but also for Jews and for Christians, really, in a way. Okay, all three of them, well, mostly Judaism and Islam, believe they make reference to the rock in association with like the Garden of Eden, with like Adam and Eve, right? They believe that this plays a key role in their creation stories. Sound good? There's like a location there that was actually in the garden. They make reference to it. For faithful Muslims, they believe that Muhammad ascended into heaven from this particular location, from this rock as well. Okay. Then for Judaism and Islam, they believe that this is the rock, the location from which Abraham was going to sacrifice his son. Now, in the context of Islam, it would be Abraham was going to sacrifice which son? That would be underneath the Jewish approach. But if it's under the Muslim approach, they have the same story, but it's sacrificing Ishmael in this context rather than sacrificing Isaac. So for a faithful Jew, it's still important, but they're going to say that this is the location where Abraham was going to almost sacrifice Isaac there. Okay, so again, it's got some really important spiritual significance for really all three of the faiths in a way. Okay. The second one is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Everybody say Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's identified, I find this fascinating, but in the Muslim faith, they rank their mosques based on like holy sites, right? It's like the number one mosque, most holy site, and number two, number three, right? This one's ranked number 3, right? The most holy mosque in the Islamic faith, okay? Here's the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is right there, right next to it, okay? So what's the spiritual significance for Muslims? Is they believe that there was this journey for Muhammad that he went from, I believe, Mecca to Jerusalem in one night, and then he ended up in the location of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I believe that's how it's recorded in the Islamic faith. Okay, so it's got some really important significance there. All right, Judaism. So we're still looking at the Temple Mount structure, right? However, the Jews, they don't have claim today to the Temple Mount itself. They can't go up, let's put it that way, they can't go up on top of the Temple Mount. So what they are confined to is using the outer wall of what is the remains of Solomon's temple. Right? They use the western side of that, the western wall. And so sometimes it's been called the Wailing Wall. Right? The western wall, the Wailing Wall. Okay? The reason why they call it the Wailing Wall is faithful Jews will go to this particular, it's like the closest that they can get to what used to be Solomon's temple, right? Which was again, means by which they could reach out to their Jewish God. And so what they do is they pray in front of the wall. They'll write their prayers down on slips of paper, and they'll put them into the cracks that are in the wall that way. So that's why they kind of reference it as the Wailing Wall. Okay. So again, you can see that here's the western wall that their faithful Jews are going to stand in front of and pray towards the Temple Mount structure. Again, this whole thing is underneath the Muslim quarter there. This is what Solomon's temple looked like, supposedly, thousands of years ago when it was still in existence before the Romans destroyed it. And this is what it looks like today. Okay, there's the Wailing Wall. You can see the Dome of the Rock up here. Okay, the Christian quarter. So the Christian quarter is really off to the side, away from the Temple Mount. But they still have some spiritual significant importance to the old city of Jerusalem because of some locations associated with Jesus. Okay, so the important structure that is kind of like a main point of the Christian quarter is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Everybody say sepulchre. Sometimes we have a difficult time looking at the word and then pronouncing it. Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It's in the region of Golgotha. Golgotha is identified as the place of the skull. It's the location in which Jesus was crucified. I think according to Christian theology, it was considered to be outside of the gates of Old Jerusalem, outside of the walls of Old Jerusalem. So I'm not sure how it's still a part of the Christian quarter. If the Christian quarter is inside the old gates, I'm not sure how that works. Supposedly it contains the tomb where Jesus was laid after the crucifixion. So for Christians that want to visit Jerusalem, it's got some spiritual significance to it again. According to the map, here's the Christian quarter out here. And again, it's away from the Temple Mount on the other opposite side. So this is not the best picture of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, but you can see the cross up there on top. This is supposedly the tomb where Jesus was laid. All right. Any questions?
Can you go back to that last one?
The last picture or the last this?
Yeah.
Right? So you got Golgotha, place of the skull, crucifixion, and then the tomb. Right? So you can understand why these three faiths, the followers of these three faiths, would have some motivation to control Jerusalem, right? so that their followers can access these holy sites, so that pilgrimages can be taking place as well. Sound good? Any questions? No? What's this?